Hi guys, and welcome back to Paolo's video. This time I will talk a little about this last model that I just finished in this few hours before, and it's related to the CR.42 produced in plastic by ICM models. I think they are all Russian or anyway East European company, and it's very interesting because it's one of the few aircraft in this scale in 132 produced in plastic. Sometimes we have very interesting subjects used by the Italian Air Force Regia Aeronautica during the Second World War, produced in 32, but they are usually made in resin and they became very pricey and quite difficult to build up. So this time we were lucky because this company had this brilliant idea to reproduce one of the most important planes of the Regia Aeronautica during the war, and this model that looks a little strange, as you can see from the pictures, from the images. It's let me see if I can offer you a better light. It is always a little dark in my little working place. Anyway, I had to cut the model over the wings, and because it's a section that will be used in a diorama for figures. So there was the needing for the guy that wanted it to have a particular dimension over the wings. Usually these planes can be quite impressive for the wingspan that is always around over 30 centimeters even in this scale. And so I had the necessity to study a proper cut to make it fit to the base where it will be used for, with some pilots. In front is an incredibly skilled figure painter, so this is a model that he wanted as a background for his nice, incredibly nice diorama. And many painters now have this new trend to use to combine what was the old way of modeling, so just the subject himself plus the figures in front, and to have a real proper background of the military object cutted in different position and in different pieces. So this time was a little bit tricky because this was a biplane, and the study how to proceed with the cutting of the wings was not so easy. I had to make several dry fit and dry tests, and before I can actually start the proper build up of the model. And indeed this model also had another quite difficult point, that was the featuring of the camouflage. The Italian airplanes used some of the most difficult camouflage to reproduce in scale, and this was the typical three-tone used by Regia Aeronautica during the 40s, so 43 and so on. The plane is exactly the one featured over the instruction sheet from ICM, and little later on I will talk a little also about that. And basically the mounting is pretty nice. There is no issues. The company made an excellent work, probably over detailing the plane, because you have inside the box also the complete engine with all the heads and the possibility to make an assembly, also the covering whole of the final part of the motor. And it's a little too big, I mean, for the purpose of such kind of planes. Or you make something like figures and barrels on the ground and so on, with little diorama around, but the purpose to make the engine completely open, I don't know, in my opinion, is not so usable, also because then you really need maintenance and mechanics around to make it, but this is just my personal taste. About the model, there is some minor issues. You see that the company is quite young in making these kind of subjects, because they made very few mistakes, that I really cannot understand, because usually those companies are famous to have plenty of extra details, even too much. They are very nice to be used. For example, my model, I don't think it was my box. I think it was really, reading some review online, was probably an issue or something that they forget, at least in this early productions, early boxes, I think that they will go on using this mold, and probably as they already did with other subjects, to hire the molds to Italeri and to other company. Probably Italeri will surely get inside the game and borrow the mold, because it's a so interesting item for them. So with a different decal sheet, with the correct decal sheet, because there is some issues also around that, it will be possible to make plenty more boxes than the one that we have now. So I think they started with the Luftwaffe version, the German plane that have different landing gear with open and exposed wheel, and I also think they made a Caccia Notturno version that was the night fighter, using also bombs and different camouflage, plane in black, something like that. I go by memory because I don't remember so much right now about this plane. I made several CR.42 during my modeling career, but it was a long time that I didn't build up one with my actual skill, with the skill that I have today, And so what for me was a little bit disappointing, I say, was the missing of a little photo etched set, at least for the seat belts, because those planes have an open. They were quite famous to be planes without a closed canopy, the Italian one. So so this one, G50 and Mach style and so on, was an open kind of spider plane, and so it was very easy to see the inner part of the cockpit, and it was very sad not to have the specific seat belts. I hope that you can see them. They were quite impressive, because Italian planes used to have a kind of strange seat belts inside, with chains around the leg of the pilots, no? So it was something that was a little bit different from German and American planes, and they had a kind of little, like when you had to change the bicycle, around the body of the pilot. So it was something specific, and it's a little bit tricky to reproduce it in a bigger scale, because of course you cannot use the ordinary photo etched chain, so you have to use a real little chain to make it looks decently real, and I think I get it. Also, another note is about the color. Remember that CR.42 didn't have the cockpit painted like ordinary verde anticorrosione, the typical interior green used by many Italian planes. This was painted in gray, so I was nearly making, I really hope that you can see, because I'm working with different hands, and maybe from this point of view you can see a little bit more of the cockpit side, the chains. And anyway, it was painted in light gray, so it was one of the main issues to make a proper cockpit of the CR.42. The mounting is quite, the assembly, is quite easy. There is no special issues. If you really want to find some stuff about the company, this ICM, probably is just, in my opinion, about the type of plastic they use, because it's extremely soft. I already used part of their kits to scratch build the TCA 60 tractor, It was another box even from ICM, and also the other plastic was extremely soft, a little too bit soft, seems a kind of rubber. It reminds to me the kind of plastic used during the 90s by AMT over their planes, and it was a little bit complicated not to damage the parts when you cut them from the sprue and when you glue them with the ordinary plastic cement that we use for ordinary modeling, So the plastic is a kind of different than Tamiya standard and Tamiya type, Another issue that I found, excluding the painting, that I said was the most difficult part of all this build, because of the schema, So the schema was extremely complicated. You have to be very careful with references and so on, because the distance also between the amoeba, that they call it, the spot over the fuselage, have to be quite tight. It should not be so far away one from the other. Also, the color should be chosen quite properly. There is a special set made by I remember the Aeromaster color, that in my opinion were the best one about these colors, but also Life Color made pretty decent one. And then of course you're always in the field of the kind of shade you want to obtain with the painting. Everything was made with that airbrush. It is an old evolution airbrush from Germany, and incredibly well done in materials, I mean. So the nozzle was 0.15, the one that I used, completely thinner. The paint, I think something like 80%, if not 90% of thinner, and 10-15% of paint inside. So you have to remake the painting scheme time and time and time, not to make it too heavy and to have that kind of definition all around the plane. This is in 32 scale is something that it strikes immediately the high side. So when you look at the model, you immediately are taken by the camouflage. The camouflage is everything on this kind of Italian planes. You know, there is even worse one, because if you take, for example, the Canz 1007 and so on, or other ones, other bombers used by Italians in the Second World War, they used a kind of camouflage that was named polycyclica, and that polycyclica paints was famous because they had the color that were covering each other. So over the green you have the red coming up, and over the red again the green, so you have to retake time by time. If you look carefully in Google the polycyclic paint scheme, you will understand probably at once what kind of complicated camouflage I mean. That's why probably even if the models have been released nearly 20 years ago in resin by Alpha Flight, it's very difficult to see assembled model of the Canz 1007, even the Mono or the B Deriva. It's extremely difficult to find them, you know. Probably also for the camouflage that in 1/48 scale became even more complicated because it's smaller, you know. About this one anyway, as said, the model is pretty decent. The proportion is absolutely well taken, so the shape is exactly that. When you see the model, you say, okay, that's really a CR.42. If I remember the old production from Smeralty Plast in 150, I took it because I love the planes from Regia Aeronautica, but they didn't look at all in a proper shape like a CR.42, sorry. So it was a little bit disappointing. It was the only stuff that you could have at the time, but it was a very different from the recent production from Classic Airframe, or even better from the Italeri model, that is actually, in my opinion, the best CR.42 in 1/48 scale you can always you can find around. You know. So that's it. There is not so special issues in this model. I say that the most complicated feature was just about the paint scheme that took to me nearly 200 hours of work to do it properly, because it's really complicated. So it's stuff that you have to go on for an entire week of modeling every day, to paint and paint and paint and paint and retake, in the hope that you don't make mistake, as well as the under part of the plane is the propeller fall off because it's not fixed, you know. This model have to fly with me, not to fly alone. I have to fly with me to Italy soon, and will be delivered by the owner. So of course the propeller, I took it away. Another interesting note, now that I see that I can tell you, remember that the Italian planes and the inner part of the propeller that was or dark green or black, depending from the plane, and it's specific for this type of fighters. One of the last issues that I found is not a real issue, you know, it's something that may be considered like a plus or maybe considered like a minus, depending from your skill. It's about the decal sheet that, in my opinion, was pretty decent, really nicely done, honestly. The only issues that I think is possible to say about it is that the film they used, the film, the transparent film over the one that they printed, the numbers and the insignias and so on, is extremely thin. So when you are working with these big decals, it's extremely complicated and very easy to make a damage, because if you just wrinkle them a little, then the numbers will be destroyed. And of course, in decal sheet there is no turning point, so if you make the mistake to wrinkle them, then you are in serious trouble, because also the numbers are extremely complicated to find, even more because the model is pretty new. So in 1/32 scale you don't have, still I think now it's the time that I'm making this video, this is September 2021, so I don't think there is so many extra detail decal set apart that you can buy for this plane. Still today probably soon Tauro Model or companies like that will do something excellent for the plane, but right now there is not so much issues, and this is a problem because if you make the other version that you have in the in the instruction sheet of this box, I think this box was the number, let me guess here, 32, I think 32020, so it's this art box is this one. You can see that the plane that I made was this was this one, you see, but if you want to do the other version, I read around, so I didn't know this, the numbers on the fuselage are mistaken, and I think it's quite a bit complicated to correct them if you want to build this one that was from the 18° gruppo, November 1940. Instead, the one that I made was June 1941 in Sicily. That one, yep. And also they forget to add a little detail that is maybe a little complicated when you have finished all this camouflage, because the position is not so easy to bend and to mask. I mean, the white band that they had on the fuselage you have to paint. So this I didn't paint it because I was lucky enough to have a spare decal, I think coming from a Tamiya A6M0, and it was a spare part that I had inside there, so I had to cut it, two of them, because they were a little the fuselage section in the tail of the CR.42 is much bigger than the Zero, so you had to use 1.5 of that extra sheet. I was lucky, it was really a matter of lucky, otherwise you have to paint, and it may be little tricky because you know to work in that area with that special section of fuselage, and the detail is very easy maybe to damage and to make a mess when you think that you are done with the painting. So that's it. I mean, if they improve these little issues, this can be a perfect model of the CR.42. I know some friends that just bought a racing plane. It was another company making the full racing kit of this aircraft. Very interesting, but you know, I think you can make 3 or 4 of them with the same price. So it's always better to work with plastic. It should be better, a little better quality plastic in my opinion, or a little more crispy and hard plastic instead of the very soft one currently used by ICM. Anyway, the model is absolutely a stunner, and I enjoy it so much to build and paint it, because when I have to do this works in painting I really enjoy it, and absolutely buy it, take it, and enjoy it. That's it. See you in the next one.